The dust-laden wind whipped across the street as Katherine Sullivan stood frozen, her threadbare shawl offering little protection against the Colorado evening chill. The year was 1878, and Canon City was bursting at the seams with fortune seekers. But Katherine had found only heartache and empty pockets since arriving 6 months ago. As she stared at the tall, broad-shouldered cowboy before her, his piercing blue eyes making her heart flutter despite her best efforts, she finally spoke the words that had been lodged in her throat. "I'm too poor for you, Quincy," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "Your father owns half the county. I have nothing but debts and an ailing mother to care for." Quincy Daniels removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair as he closed the distance between them with 2 confident strides. The setting sun caught the silver of his belt buckle, but it was the earnestness in his expression that truly shone. "Then I'll be poor beside you happily, Katherine," he said with such conviction that the bustle of Main Street seemed to fade away. "Money ain't never made a man worth anything. It's what's in here that counts." He placed his hand over his heart, calloused fingers splayed against the fabric of his shirt. Katherine's breath caught as she searched his face for any sign of mockery or pity, but found only determination. Still, she knew better than to believe in fairy tales. Life in the West had taught her harsh lessons about reality. "Your father would disown you," she argued, though part of her longed to believe him. "The great Edmund Daniels doesn't take kindly to his only son consorting with the daughter of a failed prospector." Quincy's jaw tightened. "My father doesn't dictate my heart, Katie. He never has." The saloon doors across the street banged open, reminding Katherine that they stood in full view of the town's gossips. She stepped back, smoothing her faded blue dress, once her Sunday best but now worn daily out of necessity. "Fine words, Quincy Daniels, but words don't feed hungry bellies or pay rent that's 3 weeks overdue," she said, forcing steel into her voice though it threatened to break. "I need to get back to Mother." Before Quincy could respond, Katherine turned and walked briskly down the dusty street toward the tiny one-room cabin she shared with her mother on the edge of town. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she fought the urge to look back, knowing that if she saw his face again, her resolve might crumble. The cabin came into view, little more than a shack really, with its weathered boards and crooked chimney. Katherine paused to compose herself before entering. Her mother couldn't bear any more worry. Inside, Mary Sullivan sat by the window, her once nimble fingers working slowly at mending a tear in one of Katherine's few remaining petticoats. Her mother's illness had progressed rapidly over the winter, leaving her frail and short of breath. "You're later than usual, dear," Mary noted without looking up, her voice thin but warm. Katherine hung her shawl on the nail by the door. "Mrs. Hornsby needed extra help with inventory at the mercantile. She paid me an extra quarter." The lie came easily, better than admitting she'd lingered in town hoping to catch a glimpse of Quincy, only to have him find her first. "That's wonderful," her mother said, finally lifting her gaze. Her sharp eyes narrowed. "You've been crying." "Just the wind and dust," Katherine insisted, moving to the small stove to stir the meager stew she'd left simmering. "Dinner's nearly ready." Mary set her sewing aside. "It was that Daniels boy again, wasn't it? I've seen how he looks at you in church." Katherine's hand stilled on the wooden spoon. "Mother, please. You think I don't know why you walk through town instead of taking the back path?" Mary's voice carried no judgment, only a mother's knowing concern. "He seems a decent sort, despite his father." "It doesn't matter what sort he is," Katherine replied, ladling stew into their 2 chipped bowls. "We live in different worlds." "Worlds can collide, child," Mary said softly, accepting the bowl with trembling hands. "Your father and I came from different stations, yet we found happiness." Katherine sat across from her mother at their small table. "And look where it got you. Father died chasing gold that didn't exist, leaving us with nothing but his debts." "He left me with you," Mary countered, her eyes momentarily bright with the strength of her younger days. "And memories of love that sustained me through the hardest times. I wouldn't trade those for all of Edmund Daniels' cattle and land." They ate in silence after that, the rich rancher's son and his intense blue gaze relegated to forbidden thoughts Katherine would examine later, alone in her bed. Morning arrived with a pounding at their door that startled Katherine awake. She scrambled from her pallet on the floor, hastily pulling a shawl over her nightdress. Her mother stirred behind the curtain that divided their tiny home. Who could that be at this hour? Mary called, her voice rough with sleep. Katherine opened the door to find Sheriff Wallace, his weathered face grim beneath his mustache. "Miss Sullivan, I've got papers here from Mr. Daniels' lawyer." Her stomach dropped. "What papers?" "Eviction notice, I'm afraid. Says you've got 3 days to vacate or pay what's owed." He handed her an official-looking document, avoiding her eyes. "I'm real sorry, Katherine. If there was anything I could do—" Katherine's fingers clutched the paper. 3 days. "But I told Mr. Leggett we'd have the money by the end of the month. I just need a little more time." Sheriff Wallace shifted uncomfortably. "It seems Daniels bought up Leggett's properties, including this one. It's his decision now." The world seemed to tilt beneath Katherine's feet. Edmund Daniels had purchased their cabin deliberately, knowing who lived here. It couldn't be coincidence. "Thank you for delivering it yourself, Sheriff," she managed to say, pride keeping her spine straight though she wanted to crumple. After he left, Katherine read the eviction notice fully, her mother looking over her shoulder. "This is my fault," Mary said, sinking onto a chair. "If I weren't ill, you could have saved enough by now." "Don't say that," Katherine insisted fiercely. "We'll figure something out, Mrs. Hornsby mentioned her sister in Denver needs help with her boarding house." "Perhaps we could," a second knock interrupted her. Katherine opened the door expecting the sheriff again, only to find Quincy standing there, hat in hand. "May I come in?" he asked, unusually subdued. Katherine stepped back, too shocked to refuse. Her mind raced had he known about his father's plans. Was this some cruel game? Quincy entered, ducking slightly beneath the low doorframe. His eyes fell on the eviction notice still clutched in Katherine's hand, and his expression darkened. "So you've heard," he said grimly. "Your father works quickly," Katherine replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Is this your doing? Did you tell him about us about yesterday?" "There is no us according to you," Quincy reminded her, though without rancor. "And no, Katherine. I found out this morning when my father announced it over breakfast, looking mighty pleased with himself. I came straight here." Mary rose shakily from her chair. "Mr. Daniels, I presume? I'm Mary Sullivan." Quincy removed his hat fully, displaying the manners that spoke of his upbringing. "Madam, it's a pleasure, though I wish it were under better circumstances." "Will you take tea, Mr. Daniels? We don't have much, but we can offer hospitality at least," Mary said with quiet dignity. "Mother, we don't need to," Katherine began. "Thank you, madam, but I didn't come for tea," Quincy interrupted gently. "I came to make this right." He turned to Katherine. "I know now why my father suddenly bought this property. Mrs. Farley at the post office saw us talking yesterday and must have told him. He's trying to force you out of town." "Why would he care who you speak with?" Mary asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. Quincy's gaze never left Katherine's face. "Because I told him 2 weeks ago that I intended to court your daughter properly, and he forbade it. Said he had plans for me to marry Eleanor Whitfield from Denver, to combine our ranch with her father's mining interests." His voice hardened. "I told him I'd make my own choices." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks, both at the revelation that he'd spoken of her to his father and at the impossibility of what he was suggesting. "And now he's retaliating through us," she said quietly. "I won't let him," Quincy stated firmly. "My grandfather left me a small parcel of land and some savings of my own. My father can't touch it. I'm offering to pay your rent." "No," Katherine cut him off, pride flaring. "We don't need charity, especially not yours." Quincy stepped closer, his voice dropping. "It's not charity, Katherine. It's me standing by what I said yesterday. I meant every word." Mary cleared her throat. "Perhaps I should give you young people a moment." She retreated behind the curtain, though in the tiny cabin, privacy was merely an illusion. Once they were as alone as possible, Quincy spoke again. "Katherine, listen to me. My father thinks he can control everything and everyone with his money. I refuse to let him use it against you to get to me." "And what happens when he finds another way?" Katherine challenged. "When he threatens your inheritance or your position at the ranch? Will you still be so noble then?" "You still don't understand," Quincy said, frustration evident in his voice. "I'd give it all up in a heartbeat if it meant being true to myself and to what I feel for you." Katherine's heart raced at his words, but she forced herself to be practical. "We've barely spoken more than a dozen times, Quincy. You don't even know me." "I know enough," he insisted. "I know you work harder than anyone in this town to care for your mother. I know you never complain, though you have every right to. I know your smile lights up the church on Sundays, rare as it is. And I know I want the chance to earn more of those smiles." Katherine felt her resolve wavering. "This is madness." "Maybe," he conceded, "but I'd rather be mad with you than sensible and miserable without you." Before Katherine could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Through the small window, she saw 3 riders approaching Edmund Daniels, flanked by 2 of his ranch hands. "He followed you," Katherine whispered, a new fear gripping her. Quincy's expression hardened. "Stay inside," he instructed, moving toward the door. "This is between him and me." "This is my home," Katherine argued, following him. "I won't hide." Outside, Edmund Daniels dismounted with the fluid grace of a man 20 years younger. Tall and imposing in his tailored suit, he regarded the small cabin with undisguised contempt before his gaze settled on his son. "I thought I might find you here," he said, his voice carrying the refined accent of his Eastern education. "Disobeying me again, I see." Quincy stood his ground, positioning himself slightly in front of Katherine. "I'm a grown man, Father. I make my own decisions." "Not while you live under my roof and work my land," Edmund replied coldly. His gaze shifted to Katherine. "Miss Sullivan, I presume? I see why my son is infatuated." "You're quite pretty in a common sort of way." Katherine lifted her chin. "Mr. Daniels, I'd say it's a pleasure, but I was raised not to lie." A flicker of surprise crossed Edmund's face before he laughed without humor. "Spirited too. Nevertheless, this ends now. Quincy, get on your horse." "We're leaving." "No," Quincy stated simply. Edmund's expression darkened. "I've been patient, son. I've allowed you your youthful rebellion, but it's time to face reality. The Sullivans will be gone from this property in 3 days, and you will return to your responsibilities. Eleanor Whitfield and her father arrive next week to finalize our arrangement." "I'm not marrying Eleanor," Quincy said firmly, "and the Sullivans aren't going anywhere unless they choose to." Edmund's eyebrows rose. "And how do you propose to stop the eviction?" "With your grandfather's paltry inheritance. I've already arranged to have those funds frozen until you come to your senses." Katherine saw Quincy falter for the first time, though he recovered quickly. "You can't do that. It's my money by right." "I can and I have," Edmund replied smoothly. "As trustee until your 30th birthday, I'm acting in your best interests." His cold gaze swept over Katherine again. though I suppose you could marry Miss Sullivan right now. Of course, if you do, you'll be cut off completely. No inheritance, no position at the ranch, not a cent to your name. Your choice." The silence that followed was deafening. Katherine felt as though her heart might break through her ribs, though whether from anger or fear, she couldn't tell. This cruel man was willing to destroy his son's future to maintain control. "Mr. Daniels," she began, stepping forward despite Quincy's attempt to hold her back. "Your son and I are merely acquaintances. There's no need for these threats." Edmund's smile was predatory. "Is that so? Then why did Mrs. Farley see you two in what appeared to be quite an intimate conversation yesterday? And why did my son declare at breakfast 2 weeks ago that he intended to court you?" Katherine swallowed hard. "Perhaps your son was simply being kind to someone less fortunate. It wouldn't be the first time a wealthy man amused himself with false promises to a poor girl." She felt Quincy stiffen beside her, knew her words had wounded him, but pressed on. "Rest assured, Mr. Daniels, I harbor no illusions about my station compared to your son's. We'll be gone from your property within 3 days, and you need not worry about me interfering in your family's affairs again." Edmund studied her for a long moment, then nodded with satisfaction. "Smart girl. At least one of you sees reason." He turned back to Quincy. "Come home when you're ready to apologize. Elena arrives on Tuesday." With that, he remounted his horse and departed with his men, leaving dust swirling in his wake. The moment they were out of sight, Quincy rounded on Katherine. "Why did you say those things? You made it sound like I've been toying with you." Katherine's composure finally broke, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "Because he's right, Quincy. Look at this place." She gestured wildly at the dilapidated cabin. "Look at me and my worn dresses and rough hands. I'm not part of your world, and pretending otherwise only makes things harder." "You think I care about any of that?" Quincy demanded, his voice rising. "You think I give a damn about fancy dresses or soft hands? I care about you, Katherine. About your strength and your spirit, and the way you look at me like you can see past all the Daniels money to the man underneath." "And what about your father?" she challenged. "Are you really prepared to lose everything for someone you barely know?" "Yes," he answered without hesitation. The simplicity of his response stole her breath. From inside the cabin, Mary called weakly, "Katherine, is everything all right?" The reminder of her mother's fragile condition brought Katherine back to reality. "I need to check on her," she said, wiping her tears hastily. "You should go. Your father might send someone back to watch the place." Quincy didn't move. "This isn't over, Katherine. I meant what I said yesterday, and I mean it now. I'll be poor beside you happily if that's what it takes." "Please just go," she whispered, unable to bear the intensity of his gaze any longer. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded, though determination still lined his face. "I'll be back tomorrow. We'll figure this out together." Katherine watched him mount his horse and ride away, her heart torn between hope and despair. Once he was gone, she returned to her mother, finding her more pale than usual. "That man is Edmund Daniels?" Mary asked, sinking back onto her bed. Katherine nodded, pouring her mother a cup of water. "Yes, he's as pleasant as all the stories suggest. And his son is quite determined," Mary observed with a slight smile. "Reminds me of your father." "Mother, don't," Katherine pleaded. "We need to focus on where we'll go. Denver seems our best option now." Mary took a sip of water. "Perhaps. But I think we should wait to see what tomorrow brings before making any decisions." Katherine spent the rest of the day packing their meager belongings, trying not to think about Quincy or his impossible promises. By evening, exhaustion overtook her, and she fell into a troubled sleep beside her mother's bed. Morning brought another knock, but this time when Katherine opened the door, she found Mrs. Hornsby from the mercantile standing there with a basket. "Good morning, dear," the older woman said cheerfully. "I've brought some things for you and your mother. Heard about the eviction news travels fast in Canon City." Katherine accepted the basket gratefully, though pride made her uncomfortable. "You shouldn't have, Mrs. Hornsby. We can manage." "Nonsense," Mrs. Hornsby replied, stepping inside uninvited. "Everyone needs help sometimes. Besides, I came with news. There's a job opening at the Silver Dollar Hotel. They need a new housekeeper since Mrs. Peters is expecting. The pay is better than what I can offer at the Mercantile, and it comes with a room in the staff quarters big enough for two." Hope flared in Katherine's chest. "A room? For both of us?" "It's nothing fancy," Mrs. Hornsby cautioned. "But it's clean and warm, and the owner, Mr. Grayson, is a fair man. I told him about your situation, and he's willing to hold it for you if you can start Monday." For the first time in days, Katherine felt she could breathe. "Mrs. Hornsby, I don't know how to thank you." "Thank me by taking it," the woman said firmly, "and by not letting pride stand in the way of a good opportunity." After Mrs. Hornsby left, Katherine shared the news with her mother, whose relief was palpable. "God provides," Mary said softly, "just when we thought all was lost." Katherine spent the morning organizing their belongings for the move and caring for her mother, whose strength seemed to be returning slightly with the reduction in stress. Around midday, she heard the now familiar sound of hoofbeats approaching. Her pulse quickened as she peered out the window, expecting to see Quincy. Instead, she saw a woman dismounting from a fine chestnut mare. The visitor was perhaps 10 years older than Katherine, elegantly dressed in a riding habit that screamed wealth and privilege. Katherine opened the door cautiously. "May I help you?" The woman studied her with frank curiosity. "You must be Katherine Sullivan. I'm Victoria Daniels, Quincy's older sister." Surprise rendered Katherine momentarily speechless. She hadn't even known Quincy had a sister. Victoria smiled slightly at her reaction. "May I come in? I promise I'm nothing like my father." Katherine stepped aside, wondering what fresh complication this would bring. Victoria entered, looking around the cabin with interest rather than the contempt her father had shown. "I apologize for arriving unannounced," Victoria said, removing her gloves. "But after the scene at breakfast this morning, I thought it best to meet you myself." "Scene?" Katherine echoed, her stomach knotting with dread. Victoria's expression softened with something like admiration. "My little brother finally stood up to our father, declared he wouldn't be marrying Alina Whitfield under any circumstances, and that if father wanted to disown him, so be it." She shook her head. "In all my 29 years, I've never seen father so apoplectic." Katherine sank onto a chair, her legs suddenly weak. "He didn't." "Oh, but he did," Victoria confirmed. "Then he packed a bag and rode off, saying he was going to find work in town since he's apparently no longer welcome at the Daniels ranch." "This is madness," Katherine whispered, echoing her words from yesterday. "He's throwing away everything for what? A girl he barely knows." Victoria studied her thoughtfully. "You really don't understand, do you? Quincy's been watching you for months, since Christmas at least. Always finding excuses to ride into town when he knew you'd be working at the Mercantile. Asking questions about you that he thought were subtle." Her lips quirked. "My brother is many things, but subtle isn't one of them." The revelation that Quincy's interest predated their few encounters left Katherine reeling. "But why me? There are plenty of suitable young ladies in Canon City." "Perhaps because you're the only one who doesn't simper and flutter her eyelashes when he's around," Victoria suggested dryly. "Or perhaps because he sees in you what our mother had: strength, dignity, and a genuine heart." Mary's voice came from behind the curtain. "Your mother is no longer with us." She emerged slowly, her curiosity evidently overcoming her weakness. Victoria's expression softened further. "No, madam." She passed 5 years ago. Consumption. I'm sorry for your loss, Mary said sincerely. Thank you, Victoria replied. She would have liked you both, I think. She never cared much for society's rules about who belonged where. She turned back to Katherine. Which brings me to why I'm here. Quincy asked me to give you this. She handed Katherine an envelope. Inside was a deed and a key. What is this? Katherine asked, confusion evident in her voice. The deed to a small property just outside of town, Victoria explained. It belonged to our maternal grandfather. Father could never touch it because it was left specifically to Quincy in trust, with me as trustee, not father. It's not much, a small house and a few acres, but it's free and clear, and no one can take it from him. Katherine stared at the document in disbelief. Why are you giving this to me? I'm not, Victoria said simply. Quincy wanted you to know that if you choose, you and your mother would be welcome there. He's already gone to make it habitable. Apparently, it's been empty since grandfather died 2 years ago. I can't accept this, Katherine insisted, trying to hand the deed back. It's too much. Victoria didn't take it. It's not a gift, Katherine. It's an option. Quincy wanted you to know you have choices before you make any decisions about leaving town. Mary stepped forward, her eyes more alert than Katherine had seen in weeks. Where exactly is this property? About 2 miles north of town, Victoria replied. Near Thompson Creek. Quiet but not isolated. Mary nodded thoughtfully. And your brother, he intends to court my daughter properly. Mother, Katherine protested, mortified. Victoria smiled fully for the first time. Yes, madam. Though knowing Quincy, his ideas of courting might involve more fence mending than flowers. Mary laughed, a sound Katherine hadn't heard in too long. Practical courting, I approve. This is all happening too fast, Katherine said, feeling overwhelmed. Yesterday we were facing eviction. Today there's a hotel job and now this property. And Quincy has left his home and his future because of me. It's not right. No, Victoria agreed. What's not right is my father using his power and wealth to control his children's lives. Quincy's making his own choice, Katherine. The question is, what choice will you make? Katherine looked down at the deed in her hands, then at her mother, who was watching her with a gentle, knowing expression. We've already accepted the position at the Silver Dollar, Katherine said slowly. It seems ungrateful to change plans now. Victoria nodded. Then take the job. The property will still be there when you're ready, if you're ever ready. Quincy didn't expect an immediate answer. He just wanted you to know that with or without his father's blessing, he intends to make a life here in Canon City. A life he hopes might someday include you. After Victoria left, Katherine and Mary sat in stunned silence, the deed lying between them on the table. What do you think, Mother? Katherine finally asked. Mary reached across to take her daughter's hand. I think God works in mysterious ways, and sometimes happiness arrives in unexpected packages. She squeezed Katherine's fingers. I also think you should go find that young man and talk to him directly, instead of letting messengers speak for both of you. The suggestion terrified and thrilled Katherine in equal measure. What if this is all a terrible mistake? What if he regrets his decision in a month or a year? What if he doesn't? Mary countered. What if this is the chance for happiness your father always wanted for you? She smiled gently. You've spent years taking care of me, Katherine. Perhaps it's time you allowed yourself to be taken care of too. With her mother's blessing, Katherine set out to find Quincy. Mrs. Hornsby at the Mercantile directed her to the livery stable, where apparently Quincy had secured employment with Mr. Jenkins, who had been looking for help since his son left for California. As Katherine approached the livery, she heard the rhythmic sound of hammering. Following the noise around to the back of the building, she found Quincy repairing a broken stall door. his shirt sleeves rolled up to expose forearms corded with muscle. Sweat glistened on his brow despite the cool spring air. He looked up at her approach, surprise giving way to a smile that made her heart skip. "Katherine," he said, straightening, "I was going to come see you this evening." "Your sister visited us," Katherine said, suddenly uncertain what to say now that she was face to face with him. "She gave us the deed." Quincy set down his hammer. And I think you're being reckless," she blurted out. "You've given up everything, your home, your inheritance, your position, all because of some infatuation with a girl who can offer you nothing in return." His expression remained calm, patient even. "Is that what you think this is? An infatuation?" "What else could it be?" Katherine challenged. "We've barely spoken more than a handful of times." "I've known you longer than you've known me," Quincy said quietly. "I've watched you at church and in town, seen how you care for your mother, how you work without complaint, how you hold your head high despite everything. I admired you from afar before I ever found the courage to speak to you." Katherine felt her cheeks warm. "That's not the same as knowing me." "No," he agreed. "It's not. Which is why I want the chance to know you properly, to court you if you'll allow it." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the clean scent of soap beneath the day's work. "I'm not asking you to make any decisions now, Katherine. I'm just asking for an opportunity to show you that what I feel is real." The earnestness in his eyes made her breath catch. "And what about your father, your future?" "My father will either come around or he won't," Quincy said with a shrug that didn't quite hide the hurt beneath. "As for my future, I'm making one day by day. Jenkins is paying fair wages and the property by Thompson Creek needs work, but it's a start. Mrs. Hornsby found us positions at the Silver Dollar Hotel," Katherine told him. "A room for Mother and me and decent pay." Quincy nodded, no disappointment visible in his expression. "That's good. Your mother needs comfortable lodgings, especially with her health." His lack of protest surprised her. "You're not upset that I'm not rushing to accept your offer? Would you respect me if I expected that?" he countered. "Katherine, I meant what I said. I'll be poor beside you happily, but that doesn't mean you have to be beside me at all if that's not what you want." The simple dignity in his words moved her deeply. Here was a man who had sacrificed everything on the mere hope that she might someday return his feelings, yet he placed no demands on her in return. "Mother thinks I should give you a chance," Katherine admitted softly. Quincy's eyes lit up. "Your mother is a wise woman." "She also thinks I should take the hotel position for now," Katherine added, "to be practical." "Then that's what you should do," he agreed readily. "The property will still be there. I'll still be here." Katherine studied him, this wealthy rancher's son now standing in a livery stable with dirt on his hands and hope in his eyes. Something warm unfurled in her chest, something that felt dangerously like the beginning of love. "Sunday," she said suddenly, "after church. Perhaps you could call on us at the hotel. For tea." Quincy's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I'd be honored, Miss Sullivan." The move to the Silver Dollar Hotel occurred smoothly 2 days later. Mr. Grayson, the owner, proved to be as fair as Mrs. Hornsby had promised, providing a small but comfortable room with 2 narrow beds, and even helping to transport Mary, who was still weak but improving daily. Katherine threw herself into her new duties, learning the routines of the hotel with determination. The work was harder than the mercantile had been: endless beds to make, floors to scrub, linens to wash, but the pay was indeed better, and meals were included for staff. As Sunday approached, Katherine found herself growing increasingly nervous about Quincy's visit. What would they talk about? Would her mother embarrass her with too direct questions? Would Quincy regret his impulsive decisions when faced with the reality of their modest quarters? When Sunday finally arrived, Katherine attended church with her mother, acutely aware of the whispers that followed them. News of Edmund Daniels' son leaving home had spread through Canon City like wildfire, and the connection to Katherine hadn't gone unnoticed. "Ignore them," Mary whispered as they took their seats. "People will always talk. It doesn't mean what they say matters." Katherine nodded, though the stares made her uncomfortable. She scanned the church but saw no sign of Quincy, which both disappointed and relieved her. Perhaps he had reconsidered after all. But as the service ended and they filed out into the spring sunshine, there he stood by the church steps, dressed in his Sunday best, though Katherine noted it wasn't as fine as what he'd worn previously. Clearly, the clothes he'd taken from home were limited. "Miss Sullivan, Mrs. Sullivan," he greeted them formally, removing his hat. "I hope you're settling well at the hotel." "Quite well, thank you, Mr. Daniels," Mary replied with a warmth that made Katherine both grateful and embarrassed. "We're looking forward to your visit this afternoon." "As am I," Quincy said, his eyes finding Katherine's briefly before propriety demanded he look away. 3 o'clock, as we discussed," Katherine nodded, suddenly shy. "Yes, room 12 at the end of the first-floor hallway, staff quarters." "I'll be there," he promised, replacing his hat with a slight bow before departing. As Katherine and Mary walked back to the hotel, Mary leaned heavily on her daughter's arm. "He seems quite serious in his intentions," she observed. "It's just tea, Mother," Katherine demurred, though her racing pulse suggested otherwise. Mary's knowing smile said she wasn't fooled. "Of course, dear, just tea." The afternoon arrived all too quickly. Katherine had arranged for a small tray of refreshments from the hotel kitchen, nothing elaborate, but presentable. She changed into her one good dress, a blue cotton that brought out her eyes, and pinned her dark hair into a simple but neat arrangement. At precisely 3 o'clock, a knock sounded at their door. Katherine opened it to find Quincy standing there, hat in one hand and a small bouquet of wildflowers in the other. "These are for you," he said, offering the flowers. "And these are for your mother." He produced a small paper package from his pocket. "Horehound drops from the apothecary. I remember you mentioning they help with her cough." The thoughtful gesture touched Katherine deeply. "Thank you. Please come in." The tiny room felt even smaller with Quincy's tall frame inside it, but he moved with care. Settling onto the chair Katherine offered him with no sign of discomfort at the humble surroundings. Mary accepted the cough drops with genuine pleasure. "How thoughtful, Mr. Daniels." "They are indeed a great help. Please call me Quincy," he insisted. "Mr. Daniels makes me look around for my father." The mention of Edmund Daniels created a momentary awkwardness, but Mary smoothly redirected the conversation. "Katherine tells me you've taken a position at the livery stable. How are you finding the work?" "Honest and satisfying," Quincy replied without hesitation. "Jenkins is a good man to work for, and I've always preferred physical labor to ledgers and meetings." "A trait that frustrated your father, I imagine," Mary said perceptively. Quincy smiled wryly. "Among many others. Father believed the only proper place for a Daniels was behind a desk, directing others rather than doing the work himself. My preference for riding fence and working cattle was a constant disappointment to him." Katherine poured the tea, her hands surprisingly steady despite her nerves. "Have you heard from him since you left?" A shadow crossed Quincy's face. "No, Victoria visits when she can, but Father has forbidden anyone at the ranch to speak my name. He's telling people I've gone east to school to save face." "I'm sorry," Katherine said softly, handing him a cup. "I never meant to come between you and your family." "You didn't," Quincy assured her firmly. "This rift has been forming for years. Your situation just brought it to a head." He took a sip of tea. "Besides, I'm not entirely without family. Victoria supports my decision, even if she thinks I could have handled it with more diplomacy. Your sister seems very sensible, Mary observed. She spoke highly of you when she visited. Quincy appeared surprised. Did she? Victoria usually saves her praise for her horses. The conversation flowed more easily after that. Katherine found herself relaxing as Quincy shared stories of his childhood, of learning to ride almost before he could walk, of secret fishing expeditions with the ranch hands when he was supposed to be studying. In turn, she told him about growing up in St. Louis before her father caught gold fever and brought them west, about her love of books, about the small garden she'd maintained at their previous home. Mary contributed occasionally but mostly watched them with quiet satisfaction, her eyes moving between her daughter and this young man who seemed determined to upend his life for her. Too soon, the hour grew late, and Quincy rose to leave. "This has been wonderful," he said sincerely. "Perhaps, if you're amenable, we might walk in the park next Sunday after church." Katherine glanced at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. "I would like that," she replied, a pleasant warmth spreading through her chest at the prospect. "Until then," Quincy said, taking her hand briefly. The touch of his fingers against hers sent a current up her arm that both startled and thrilled her. After he left, Mary watched her daughter with knowing eyes. "He's quite taken with you," she observed. Katherine busied herself clearing away the tea things. "He's just being kind." Katherine Sullivan, that man did not give up his inheritance and defy his father out of kindness, Mary said firmly. "The question is, how do you feel about him?" Katherine paused, considering the question honestly. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I think I'd like to find out." Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Quincy would call on Katherine every Sunday afternoon, sometimes for tea at the hotel, sometimes for walks in the town park when Mary was feeling strong enough to join them. Occasionally, he would appear at the hotel during Katherine's dinner break, bringing a small treat or simply sitting with her while she ate her meal in the staff dining room. Each encounter deepened Katherine's understanding of him. She learned that beneath his confident exterior lay a thoughtful mind and a compassionate heart. He never spoke of his father's wealth with longing or regret, seeming genuinely content with his new, simpler life. For his part, Quincy discovered Katherine's sharp intelligence, her dry wit, and her unwavering loyalty to those she cared about. He admired how she balanced the demanding work at the hotel with tender care for her mother, never complaining, though he could see the exhaustion in her eyes some evenings. By mid-June, Mary was strong enough to venture out more frequently. One particularly fine Saturday, when Katherine had a rare afternoon off, Quincy arrived with a borrowed wagon. "I thought perhaps you and your mother might like to see the property," he suggested hesitantly. "No expectations, just—" "It's a beautiful day, and the wildflowers are blooming along Thompson Creek." Katherine looked to her mother, who nodded enthusiastically. "I'd love to get out of town for a few hours," Mary said. "The fresh air will do me good." The journey north of Canon City took less than an hour. As they crested a small rise, a modest cabin came into view, nestled among cottonwood trees near a clear running creek. A rough split-rail fence enclosed a small pasture where two horses grazed peacefully. "It's not much compared to what you're used to," Katherine said, noting the cabin's weathered appearance despite signs of recent repairs. Quincy helped Mary down from the wagon with gentle hands. "It's more than enough for a man with simple needs," he replied. "Come, let me show you around." The cabin's interior was basic but clean, with a main room containing a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, and two doors leading to what Katherine assumed were bedrooms. Simple furniture, a table, chairs, a sofa covered in faded chintz filled the space. My grandfather wasn't one for fancy living, Quincy explained as they toured the modest home. But the roof is sound, and I've been making repairs in the evenings after work. Katherine ran her hand along a freshly sanded windowsill. You've done all this yourself. Jenkins has been teaching me carpentry, Quincy said with evident pride. Says I have a natural talent for it. Mary settled onto the sofa, looking around with approval. It's a lovely home, Quincy. Your grandfather had good taste in property. The best part is outside, Quincy said, offering his arm to Katherine. Would you like to see the creek? They walked together down a short path that led to Thompson Creek, leaving Mary resting comfortably on the sofa. The water burbled merrily over smooth stones, and wildflowers dotted the banks in a riot of colors. It's beautiful, Katherine breathed, lifting her face to the dappled sunlight filtering through the cottonwood leaves. I come here sometimes in the evenings, Quincy admitted. To think. To remind myself that this, he gestured to the peaceful scene, is worth more than all my father's cattle and land. Katherine studied his profile, noting the contentment in his expression. Do you truly not miss it? The comfort, the security? Quincy considered her question seriously. I miss certain aspects. I miss the men I worked with, the horses I trained. I miss my mother's rose garden that Victoria tends now. He turned to face her fully. But I don't miss the constraints, the expectations, the constant feeling that I was a disappointment for wanting a different kind of life than what was planned for me. And what kind of life do you want? Katherine asked softly. An honest one, he replied without hesitation. One where I work with my hands and see the tangible results of my labor. One where I'm judged by my character rather than my name or bank account. His voice gentled. One shared with someone who sees me for who I am, not what I own. The intensity in his blue eyes made Katherine's heart race. They had been courting properly for nearly 2 months now, but he had never been so direct about his feelings or intentions. Quincy, she began, uncertain what to say. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers enveloping hers. I'm not asking for promises yet, Katherine. I just want you to know that everything I've done, every choice I've made, I would make again. Because meeting you showed me what was missing in my life: authenticity, purpose, the chance to be my true self. Katherine found herself blinking back unexpected tears. I never imagined anyone would append their life for me, she confessed, especially not someone with everything you had. I didn't have everything, Quincy corrected gently. I had things. There's a difference. His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, sending shivers up her arm. Katherine, may I ask you something? She nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. Are you happy with how things are between us? With our courtship? The question surprised her. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? A hint of vulnerability crossed his face. Sometimes I wonder if you're allowing me to court you out of a sense of obligation, because of what I gave up. No, Katherine said firmly, squeezing his hand. Never think that. What's growing between us has nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with. She hesitated, still shy about naming the feelings that had been blossoming in her heart. With, he prompted, hope evident in his voice. Katherine gathered her courage. With how you make me feel, valued, seen, like my dreams and thoughts matter. She smiled softly. Like maybe there's room in this world for a different kind of story than the one I thought was written for me. Quincy's answering smile was radiant. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Katherine's eyes fluttered closed as she responded, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they parted, Quincy rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling in love with you, Katherine Sullivan, he whispered. I think I have been since that first Sunday. I saw you in church, looking so proud and beautiful despite your circumstances." The words she'd been afraid to acknowledge even to herself now rose naturally to her lips. "And I'm falling in love with you, Quincy Daniels. Despite every practical reason why I shouldn't." His laugh was soft and joyful. "Practicality is overrated." They might have remained by the creek longer, lost in this new understanding between them, had Mary not called from the cabin. "Katherine, Quincy, I think there's a rider coming." They returned to the front of the cabin hand in hand, in time to see a horse and rider approaching at a brisk trot. As the figure drew closer, Quincy tensed. "It's Victoria," he said, relief and concern mingling in his voice. His sister rarely visited during daylight hours, wary of their father discovering her continued contact with Quincy. Victoria dismounted gracefully, her expression grave. "Quincy, Katherine, Mrs. Sullivan," she greeted them hurriedly. "I'm sorry to intrude, but I had to come." "What's wrong?" Quincy asked, moving to meet her. "Is it father?" Victoria nodded, removing her riding gloves. "He's had a stroke last night. The doctor says it's serious." Katherine felt Quincy's hand tighten around hers. "How serious?" "He's conscious but weak. His right side is partially paralyzed." Victoria hesitated. "He's asking for you, Quincy." Surprise flickered across Quincy's face. "For me? Not to disown me in person, I presume." "No," Victoria said softly. I think he's afraid, and it's made him reconsider some things." Quincy turned to Katherine, conflict evident in his expression. "I should go to him." "Of course you should," Katherine agreed immediately. "He's your father." "Will you come with me?" The question was asked in a low voice, for her ears alone. Katherine glanced at her mother, who had overheard, and nodded encouragement. "If you think it would help rather than hinder." "I need you there," Quincy said simply. The admission, so straightforward and vulnerable, settled any doubts in Katherine's mind. "Then I'll come." Victoria looked between them, a smile briefly lightening her serious expression. "We should hurry. The doctor said to prepare for any outcome." The journey to the Daniels ranch was tense and mostly silent. Katherine had never seen the sprawling property before, and despite the circumstances, she couldn't help but be impressed by its scale and grandeur. The main house was larger than she had imagined, built of solid stone with wide verandas and tall windows gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Victoria led them directly inside, where a somber-faced housekeeper greeted them with obvious relief. "He's been asking for you, Mr. Quincy," she said. "Quite insistent, despite the doctor's orders to remain calm." "Some things never change," Quincy murmured, though without rancor. He turned to Katherine. "Are you ready?" She smoothed her simple dress, suddenly acutely aware of its modest quality compared to the luxury surrounding them. "As ready as I'll ever be." Edmund Daniels' bedroom was at the end of a long hallway on the ground floor. Moved there, Victoria explained in a whisper, because he could no longer manage the stairs. The large room was dimly lit, heavy curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. A nurse sat beside the massive four-poster bed, rising as they entered. "He's been resting," she informed them quietly, "but he's lucid when awake." Katherine hung back as Quincy approached the bed, where his father lay propped against several pillows. Even diminished by illness, Edmund Daniels remained an imposing figure, his silver hair and patrician features marking him as a man accustomed to power and respect. "Father," Quincy said, taking the chair the nurse vacated. "Victoria said you wanted to see me." Edmund's eyes opened, one side of his face drooping slightly. His gaze found his son, then moved past him to where Katherine stood uncertainly by the door. "You brought her," he said, his speech slurred but understandable. "Good." Quincy's surprise was evident. "You want to speak with Katherine?" "Both of you," Edmund confirmed with effort. Come closer, girl. Let me see you properly. Katherine moved forward hesitantly, stopping beside Quincy's chair. Up close, she could see the strain in Edmund's face, the effort each word cost him. "So you're the Sullivan girl," Edmund said, studying her with unnervingly direct eyes. "The one my son threw away his future for." "Father," Quincy began warningly, but Katherine placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Yes, Mr. Daniels," she replied with quiet dignity. "Though I never asked or expected him to make such sacrifices." A ghost of a smile touched the mobile side of Edmund's face. "No, I imagine you didn't." He shifted slightly, wincing. "Quincy has always been stubborn, like his mother." "A trait you usually criticize," Quincy observed. Edmund's gaze moved to his son. "Perhaps I was wrong about many things." The admission clearly cost him, not just physically but in pride. This, he gestured weakly to his immobilized body, changes perspective. Katherine felt Quincy tense beneath her hand, hopeful yet wary. "What are you saying, father?" "I'm saying I was a fool," Edmund replied bluntly. "Driving away my only son for the sake of pride and plans that mean nothing now." His breathing grew labored, and he closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, there was a new urgency in his gaze. "Victoria can't run this ranch alone, not with me like this. I need you, Quincy, to come home." Quincy stilled, his expression guarded. "On what terms?" Edmund's eyes flickered to Katherine. "Any terms you want, bring her, marry her, I don't care anymore." A touch of his old imperiousness returned. "Just don't leave your sister to shoulder this burden alone." Victoria, who had been standing silently by the door, stepped forward. "Father, Quincy doesn't need to decide immediately. You need to rest." "There may not be time," Edmund said starkly. "The doctor was not optimistic about my recovery." Katherine felt Quincy's struggle as if it were her own. He was being offered everything he had lost: his home, his inheritance, his family along with her, the woman he loved. Yet she knew how deeply his father's rejection had wounded him. Could he trust this deathbed change of heart? "Katherine," Quincy said, looking up at her, "what do you think?" The fact that he would ask her opinion in this moment before his father and sister moved her deeply. "I think," she said carefully, "that life is too short for unresolved regrets on anyone's part." Quincy held her gaze for a long moment, then turned back to his father. "I'll come home," he said finally, "but not to be your puppet or to marry whomever you deem suitable. I'll help run the ranch, work alongside Victoria, but I'll live my life on my terms." Relief visibly washed over Edmund's face. "Agreed. And Katherine is part of my life," Quincy continued firmly. "Now and if she'll have me always." Edmund's gaze moved between them, something like understanding finally dawning in his eyes. "You truly love her?" "With all my heart," Quincy confirmed without hesitation. Edmund nodded slowly. "Then she is welcome here, her and her mother." Katherine felt tears pricking her eyes at the simple acceptance, not enthusiastic, perhaps, but genuine nonetheless. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels." The older man's energy seemed to flag suddenly, his eyelids growing heavy. "Enough talking. Tired now." His good hand moved slightly, seeking his son's. "Stay." Quincy took his father's hand, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I'll stay." The nurse stepped forward, signaling that it was time to let Edmund rest. Victoria led Katherine from the room, leaving father and son alone. In the hallway, Victoria sighed deeply. "He's been like this since the stroke, vacillating between his old, imperious self and this new, almost vulnerable version. The doctor says it's common with brain injuries." "You think he meant what he said?" Katherine asked. "About accepting me?" Victoria considered the question seriously. "I think he meant it in this moment, yes. And I think seeing you and Quincy together helped him understand something he couldn't grasp before." She smiled slightly. "Besides, Father has always respected strength and dignity. You showed both just now." Catherine's thoughts turned to her mother, waiting at the cabin with no idea of this dramatic development. "There's much to consider. My mother, my position at the hotel." "One step at a time," Victoria advised wisely. "For now, let's be grateful that bridges are being mended rather than burned." The following weeks brought significant changes. Edmund's condition stabilized but did not dramatically improve. The doctor confirmed that while his life was no longer in immediate danger, he would likely never regain full use of his right side and would require ongoing care. Quincy moved back to the ranch, dividing his time between learning the business aspects of ranching that he had previously avoided and continuing to work on the cabin by Thompson Creek. Katherine maintained her position at the hotel but visited the ranch frequently, often bringing her mother, whose health continued to improve in the warm summer weather. To Catherine's surprise, Mary and Edmund developed an unlikely rapport. Perhaps it was their shared experience of serious illness, or perhaps it was simply that Mary treated Edmund as a person rather than an invalid or a feared patriarch. Whatever the reason, their conversation seemed to ease something in Edmund, making him more amenable to the changes happening around him. By August, Quincy had completed the renovations on the cabin, adding a covered porch and expanding the smaller bedroom to better accommodate Mary's needs. One evening, as they sat on this new porch watching the sunset paint Thompson Creek in gold and crimson, Quincy took Catherine's hand. "I've been thinking," he began, uncharacteristically hesitant, "about us, about the future." Catherine's heart quickened. "Oh, I know it hasn't been very long," Quincy continued, turning to face her fully. "Just 4 months since that day on Main Street, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of my love for you." Katherine smiled, squeezing his hand. "I feel the same way." "Then marry me," Quincy said simply, producing a small ring from his pocket. It was a modest piece, a single pearl set in gold, nothing like the elaborate diamond his father would have expected him to offer. "I got this in Denver last week." "It's not fancy, but it's perfect," Katherine interrupted, tears of happiness welling in her eyes. "Yes, Quincy, I'll marry you." The kiss that followed was deeper, more passionate than those they had shared before, filled with promise and certainty. When they finally parted, Quincy slipped the pearl ring onto her finger, where it fit as though made for her. "I want us to live here," he said, gesturing to the cabin. "Not at the ranch house. This place is ours, something we've built together." Katherine nodded, understanding the significance of his choice. "I'd like that. It's close enough that you can still work with Victoria at the ranch, but it's our own space. Your mother is welcome to live with us, of course," Quincy added quickly. "The bedroom we've expanded would be hers for as long as she wishes." "She'll appreciate that," Katherine said, leaning her head against his shoulder as they resumed watching the sunset. "Though I suspect she might eventually want her own place. She's been talking about opening a small dressmaking shop in town once she's fully recovered." Quincy chuckled. "Your mother is a remarkable woman, almost as remarkable as her daughter." The news of their engagement spread quickly through Canon City. Most reactions were positive, though there remained those who whispered about Quincy marrying beneath his station or speculated that Katherine was after the Daniels' fortune. Such gossip bothered Katherine less than she might have expected, secure in the knowledge of what was true between them. Edmund's reaction was subdued but accepting. "You could do worse," he told his son grudgingly when Quincy formally informed him. "At least she has sense and backbone." From Edmund Daniels, this qualified as high praise indeed. Victoria was genuinely delighted, embracing Katherine warmly. "I always wanted a sister," she confessed. And now I'll have one who doesn't simper or faint at the first sign of difficulty." The wedding took place in late September, a small ceremony in the Canon City church, followed by a modest reception at the Thompson Creek cabin. Katherine wore a simple white dress that Mary had sewn despite her still weakened hands, and Quincy looked handsome in a new suit purchased for the occasion. Edmund attended in a wheelchair, Victoria by his side. His presence was perhaps the greatest wedding gift he could have given, a public acknowledgement of his acceptance of the union. He even managed a genuine smile when Quincy kissed his bride, though he complained later about the unseemly length of said kiss. As the reception wound down and guests began to depart, Katherine found a moment alone with her new husband beside Thompson Creek, where their journey together had truly begun. "Happy, Mrs. Daniels?" Quincy asked, his arms encircling her waist as they watched the water flow past. Katherine leaned back against his chest, feeling the solid strength of him. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she admitted. "When I told you I was too poor for you that day on Main Street, I believed it with all my heart." "And I meant every word of my response," Quincy murmured against her hair. "I would have been poor beside you happily, Katherine. I still would." "I know," she said softly. "That's why I love you." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deepening shades of purple and indigo, but neither moved to return to the gathering. This moment, this promise fulfilled, belonged to them alone. In the year that followed their wedding, life settled into a rhythm that suited them both. Quincy divided his time between the ranch, where he worked alongside Victoria, managing their father's extensive holdings, and their cabin by Thompson Creek, where he continued to make improvements. Katherine kept a garden, learned to cook from Mary, and eventually took on bookkeeping responsibilities for the ranch, revealing an aptitude for numbers that impressed even Edmund. Mary's health improved steadily, and by spring, she had indeed opened a small dressmaking shop in Canon City, catering to the wives of local businessmen and ranchers. Though she maintained her room at the cabin, she often stayed in town above her shop, enjoying her newfound independence. Edmund's recovery plateaued, leaving him permanently reliant on a wheelchair and assistance with daily tasks. His temperament remained mercurial, but the sharp edges of his personality had been somewhat softened by illness and by the gradual recognition that his son had made the right choice after all, both in business and in love. In late summer, almost a year after their wedding, Katherine and Quincy sat on their porch after dinner, a habit they had established early in their marriage. The evening air was warm, filled with the scent of wildflowers and the gentle sound of the creek. "I have news," Katherine said, breaking a comfortable silence. Quincy turned to look at her, eyebrows raised in question. "I visited Dr. Morgan in town today," she continued, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "He confirmed what I've suspected for a few weeks now. We're going to have a baby, Quincy, in early spring." The expression that bloomed on Quincy's face was one Katherine knew she would remember all her days: pure, uncontained joy mingled with awe and just a touch of healthy fear. "A baby," he repeated, as though testing the word. "We're going to be parents." Katherine nodded, her own happiness reflected in his eyes. "Yes." In a sudden movement, Quincy swept her into his arms, lifting her from her chair and spinning her in a circle that made her laugh in surprise. "Careful," she protested, though she wasn't truly concerned. Quincy's arms had always been the safest place she knew. He set her down gently, his hands coming to rest on her still flat stomach with reverence. "I love you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Both of you." The following spring, their son was born, a healthy, robust boy they named James, after Katherine's father. Edmund, now fully reconciled to his son's choice of wife, presented the infant with a silver rattle that had been in the Daniels family for generations. "He has your eyes," the old man observed gruffly, studying his grandson with unconcealed interest. "But his mother's spirit, I'll wager." "God help us all if that's true," Quincy laughed, earning a mock indignant look from Katherine. As James grew, so did their family's happiness and prosperity. The ranch flourished under Quincy and Victoria's joint management, with Katherine's financial acumen contributing significantly to their success. 2 years after James, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth, named for Quincy's mother. Mary continued her dressmaking business until rheumatism made the fine work too difficult, at which point she returned to live full-time at the cabin, delighting in helping raise her grandchildren. Edmund lived to see both children's 5th birthdays before finally succumbing to a second, more severe stroke, leaving the ranch entirely to Quincy and Victoria. Through it all, the joys and sorrows, the challenges and triumphs, Katherine and Quincy remained steadfast in their love for each other. The pearl ring he had given her never left her finger, a constant reminder of promises made and kept. 10 years after their wedding, as they sat on the same porch where he had proposed, watching their children play by the creek under Mary's watchful eye, Katherine leaned her head against Quincy's shoulder. "You ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Standing up to your father, choosing me when it meant losing everything?" Quincy looked at her with the same intensity that had captivated her from the beginning, though now tempered with the deep contentment of a man who had found his true path. "I never lost anything that mattered, Katherine," he said, taking her hand in his. "And I gained everything worth having." Katherine smiled, recognizing the truth in his words. From that first moment when she had tried to push him away, claiming her poverty made her unworthy of him, to this peaceful evening surrounded by the family they had built together, their story had been one of choosing love over convention, substance over appearance, and each other above all else. "Then I'll be poor beside you happily," he had said that day on Main Street, and though life had ultimately granted them material comfort as well, it was the wealth of their love that truly defined them, a fortune no amount of money could ever match. As the sun set over Thompson Creek, painting the sky in the same glorious colors they had witnessed countless times before, Katherine silently thanked God for the courage that had allowed her to accept the gift of Quincy's love, and for the joy that had flowed from that one simple, life-changing decision. In the distance, James called for his father to come see the frog he had caught, while Elizabeth danced in circles around her grandmother, her dark curls bouncing in the fading light. Quincy pressed a kiss to Katherine's temple before rising to join their children, his laughter mingling with theirs in the sweet evening air. And Katherine knew, with absolute certainty, that she had found a happiness beyond anything she could have imagined that dusty day in Canon City, when a stubborn, blue-eyed cowboy had refused to let her believe she wasn't enough, just as she was.